Hello and welcome to another episode of the Sales Syndicate podcast, episode 45. Mad, episode 45. This is my fifth this week. Actually, no, fourth. I got another one back to back after this, so it's been a busy week. But in today's episode, we're going to be talking about the art of selling to the C-suite or execs, which is a bit of a fluffy name. But what we're really talking about is a top-down approach to sales. That's like the layman's term. But before we jump into the body of it, I will hand it over to Ceri-anne to introduce herself and the company as well. So over to you, Ceri-anne.
Yeah, cheers, Jamie. It's great to be here. I'm Ceri-anne Boucher, currently working at Moss. I'm from the Valleys in Wales. I'm hoping that you guys will tell from the accent, although I keep hearing that you can't. I started off my career.
You can definitely hear it. We're a Cardiff-based company, and you can definitely hear the Valleys accent.
What I want to hear. Okay, good. We're off to a good start. I actually trained as a biomedical scientist originally, which is usually a bit of a surprise. Started working in private healthcare, usually on the client-facing side of things. Slowly became a little bit more commercially minded and then got headhunted to be an SDR, the first SDR at a startup in B2B SaaS. Worked with them for a year or so doing the first kind of founder-led sales, which was really good fun. And then I just made the move in February of this year to Moss, which is a fintech company with 3 offices and a couple hundred people. So much bigger and a fun challenge for me. I think my role is strategic partnerships, which is a bit confusing, but I'm actually effectively an SDR.
And what do Moss do?
Oh, so it's a B2B SaaS platform. It will integrate with your existing tech stack and pull all of the data across the business from where you're spending so that your finance team can have central oversight and control. We sell to CFOs and finance managers.
Wicked. And you were saying there that you originally biomedical science degree. We've had people that have we've had civil engineers on that have gone into sales as well. So it's always a bit of a surprise when people when you actually ask what was your degree in, because most people have some really interesting degrees before they've gone into sales. So what was the main reason you wanted to change?
I think it was just like all of the skills that I thought would make me a really great scientist. I initially wanted to be a doctor. That's why I did biomed. It's the idea of being with loads of people and the constant development and the challenge of having no 2 days be the same. And then when I got approached to be an SDR, I had never considered myself as a salesperson. I'd always considered myself as a scientist. And then I realized that all of the skills that I had were just completely transferable. And as soon as I started, I totally fell in love with it. And I've been able to really bring the kind of scientific approach to being an SDR. I love reading books and I love reading reports and white papers and that kind of thing. And it's so helpful.
Very interesting. Yeah, it's weird. You wouldn't have necessarily thought there would be loads of transferable skills from biomedical science and things. But yeah. I think if, like you said, the scientific approach, which is something that's been talked about more in the last year or two, is a scientific approach to sales, isn't it? So, yeah. And I've got here, because the reason I came across your profile was a list that you featured on. So do you want to tell us about that list?
Yeah, I was really fortunate to win Top 2 SDR last year in the Sales Confidence Awards. I think probably because of how loud I am on LinkedIn, it's something that I've really been doubling down on, trying to get the word out there, especially joining a startup. I think when I joined my previous company, there were 9 of us. So, there was no marketing team. And I've been really fortunate to kind of get my name out there and somehow became number 2.
Well, there you go. Well, congratulations. And I think for anyone who's worked in a very, very small startup, it's they'll know how difficult it can be and how many different hats you have to wear. But on the plus side, how quickly you can progress in terms of your skill sets and knowledge and things.
I think having access to that VP of sales was fantastic, because it just meant that I was part of a team that was set to be 50 SDRs. It was never about just being me on my own. It was what are we setting up to scale, and it was invaluable, those insights.
Yeah, and I think it's when you have worked in big companies before, you really do notice the difference. And going from a startup to a big company, I think you just have so much more of an advantage than those that haven't worked in the startup before. But that's a slight deviation, which from the topic which we said we may do before we actually hit the record button. But back to the topic then. So, the art of selling to the C-suite, or AKA a top-down approach to sales. You mentioned when we caught up previously that you love selling to the C-suite or the execs, like top down. Why is that?
I find that you have the most success. It sounds simple, but it works. When I look back over all of the deals that I've brought in, the ones that are the largest and had the shortest buying cycle, it was all top down. I've had success selling to end users, but for the most part, if I want to create urgency and have high conversion rates, I need to go in at top level and link what I'm selling to initiatives of the business. And so I found actually reading Selling Above and Below the Line by Skip Miller started this whole kind of idea off. And that was the kind of go-to-market strategy in my previous company. And I've brought that across with great success to Moss.
And we kind of tend to set the scene or set some context to a topic before we go into like the helpful bit, or at least the bit where people hopefully get some advice and top tips and things that they can sort of put into action then. So in terms of like understanding C-suites and execs and how they differ, and how you should approach them then, like I think you used a metaphor and an analogy. I don't know what you would call it. My mum's an English teacher, so I really should know what you would call that. But the Paddington Station train conductor principle or metaphor. Do you want to just run us through that? Because I thought it was brilliant.
Thanks. Yeah, absolutely. So I came across this in my previous role. I've tried to find the original idea. I think it's from a guy called Kirk Dando, but it goes like this. You can imagine your CEO as a train conductor in Paddington Station. They've got 3 train lines, and their job is to make sure that all those trains run smoothly and that everything that needs to come in and go out on time does. They only have 3 train lines. They cannot create a 4th one. That's it. And so what that looks like in a B2B SaaS business is I might have 3 initiatives that I'm working on. That could be I need to launch in a new country. Let's say I want to get a team out in France. I want to fundraise, and to do that, I need to improve our NRR numbers. So I need to drop churn and increase upsells. And my 3rd might be we need to keep our competitive advantage, so we need to launch new product features. Those are my 3 trains. Until one of those trains leaves the station, I cannot bring another one in. That is my top level initiative. It's what I care about. So if I come in as a seller, and I try and sell to something that isn't one of those 3 trains, there is no room for it. They can't even consider it. It's going to get pushed back by 6 months, 12 months, whatever. You're going to get that, classic objection of it's not the right time, or, come back to me. So I think that if you have this kind of top-down approach, if you really think when you look at a business, like what are these initiatives and how can my tool help the exec, get this train out of the station on time? Because these execs, don't care about the functionality of the tool. They care about the problem, the train, and so I really think that's helped me focus my approach, thinking like, okay, say you want to launch in a new country. How does Moss help that? Well, you need visibility of where you're spending, and you need to be able to control a team that you're not present with. Okay, well, now I can link it to that. And therefore, that exec will be able to attach my tool within the budget for that initiative, and I'm going to increase the urgency of that deal.
It's interesting because I was speaking to Jack and Zach from We Have a Meeting, an outbound agency, and they said you'd be really, really surprised at how few cold calls execs and C-suite get. And I think that's another thing as well, like that I wanted to sort of touch on is they really, apparently, according to C-suites and execs that they speak to, they get a handful maximum a week, and they're always surprised that they don't get more cold calls. So it feels as if, given that they have this role as the train conductor, that it's almost an untapped resource, almost like you wouldn't want to share that little tip, do you? We can cut that bit out of the podcast, but yeah,
exactly.
It's like an untapped resource that people tend to steer away from for some reason, maybe that they think it's going to be more difficult. I don't know.
Yeah, I hear all the time, like I had a call the other day with the CEO, and it's not even a big company. Like our ICP here at Moss is anything from, I'd say, probably 25, 30 employees up to maybe 250. We've got customers with thousands of employees, but, that's where I find I have the most success. And, these like SaaS companies, it's really intimidating calling a CEO. Don't get me wrong. Like I'm, still have like little fluttery heart, and I have to like big myself up before I do it. I really like doing a big power stance. I don't know if anyone does like superhero stances before they do a cold call. I highly recommend it. But I just think like, what? I'm confident that I've built like a hypothesis as to what these 3 initiatives will be. If I can just hit one of them, I'm going to do something I'm actually going to help, this guy, this CEO, she's probably sat in bed at night thinking about one of these trains. So it's actually not a bad thing. I'm not interrupting. I'm offering like value. And if I come in with that approach, if I've done my research, and in doing so, I think it's a tip maybe to get onto later, but you have to approach selling on the phone to a CEO differently than you would to like a finance controller. If you come in and try and say like, "Hey, this is Ceri-anne. It's been a while. How you doing?" They're just going to hang up on you. Always. They're gonna, it's not going to work. So instead, like I really like saying, using an upfront contract and just saying like, "Hey, Jamie, it's Ceri-anne calling from Moss. In full transparency, we haven't spoken before. This is a sales call. Looking to take a minute or two of your time to ask a few questions about your new team out in France and see if there's anything that we're doing that could be helpful." How does that sound if I promise to stick to a minute or two? And I think, honestly, I can think on one hand the number of times someone said no. It just works, or you can try and use humor with it. You can be a little bit lighter, but ultimately if you just say, "This is the initiative that I think I can help you with," that exec is going to give you 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And then you get the referral.
Yeah, no, when you were talking about the superhero stance, it made me think of Ted Lasso. Do you watch Ted Lasso?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
I don't, but I keep being recommended.
Oh, you got it. So good. Yeah, definitely watch it. The last season just finished, but there's a character in it called, I think he's called Nate, and he's very, very shy, and he basically just sits down with a counselor, and they work on this way for him to build up confidence before he goes into like a big meeting or a big cold call or whatever. And it's a comedy. Yeah. So he ends up basically each time he needs to like pluck up the courage, he goes into a toilet and he spits in the mirror and gets aggressive at himself in the mirror to psych himself up, and that works really well for him. So yeah, either a superhero stance or spitting at yourself in the mirror, give one of those two a go. But yeah,
whatever works.
Yeah, whatever works, But yeah, it's interesting because with the C-suite and things, I think it's it's not a pattern interrupt, is it? Because you're not interrupting anything, but the way in which you kicked off that cold call was the Jack and Zach as well. They do something very similar. They say, "Look, I'll be honest. This is a sales call. You can either give me 30 seconds of your time, or you can throw this phone at a wall and hang up." And then they just leave it as that. And it's like the same sort of thing. It's like creating that. Like, why wouldn't someone give you 30 seconds or a minute if you could potentially help them? And I think it's it's an interesting take.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
So before we go into like the main body of it, I think we need to like sell this theory. So like benefits from your point of view of like actually going top down with execs rather than bottom up. Mm-hmm. Like what are some of the key benefits of doing that?
Well, first of all, it's urgency. The majority of deals that I see that get stalled, it's because it, the champions really bought in. They love the tool. Their team loves it. They think it's fantastic. Maybe you've spoken to like their manager and they think it's great. And then they say something along the lines of, "I'm going to go present it to my CFO and I'll get back to you." At that point, the CFO has absolutely no context for what you're selling. That person could go to the CFO and say, "Oh, it's an amazing tool that does loads of receipt fetching." But like, they don't care about that. They've delegated that job down. Like, that's your problem. You deal with that. Like, I'm not going to invest a budget that we don't have for something that doesn't benefit one of these top 3 initiatives. Like, that's what the CFO is thinking. Like, how do I explain this investment to the board when I'm already not hitting metric, X, Y, and Z? And also, you've got to dig then so much deeper with your end user or your champion to understand the ripple effects on the business. You can sit in a 45-minute discovery call really trying to unpick, well, what happens if you don't close the month on time? Okay, well, what happens then if that report doesn't get to the exec on time? Okay, so then what happens? And then by the time you get to the point that that the board can't pivot strategy quickly because they don't know the ROI of their investments, getting to that point takes so much more time versus if I go in straight away to a CFO and I say, look, typically CFOs in B2B SaaS that are around your size are looking at cost control as they scale. They're looking at visibility of spend so that they can report more efficiently, or they're looking at driving efficiency in their team so they haven't got to keep hiring as they grow. Looking forward the next 12 months, which of these 3 would you say is most relevant for you? Then they choose one. And then you say, okay, perfect. Why would you choose that one? And now I'm talking about your high-level initiative, and you're saying, well, the board wants me to, improve this metric by whatever ahead of this date. And I'm like, great, okay. So you need that in by August 31st, and then I work backwards. So realistically, if you want to, let's say we go back to, scaling in France. I don't know why it's my example, but we're here. So say you want to scale out in France. Well, you need to have this by that time, which means realistically you need to understand your budget for that by this time. So when would you need something in place to give you that insight? By that date. Okay, well, realistically, it's going to take 4 weeks to look at Moss. So we need to have a decision made by you by this date. And then I work all the way back down. And then we can come together, as a team and say, okay, so I need to talk to your finance controller this week. Why don't we have something in this afternoon? We'll then present back to you on Monday. You can then review it by Wednesday, and then we can get, start onboarding by next Friday. How does that sound? And now we've got an upfront contract that we're both bought into on a timeline that works for your initiative, versus me going to some finance controller being like, when do you think you'll need this by? And they say, oh, sorry, I've got month end. It's going to have to wait 3 weeks. And I don't hear from them again. It's a completely different buying cycle, and you get actual urgency, and you tend to see meetings that are on the day rather than like in 3 weeks' time.
Yeah, it's interesting because the mapping to the strategic objectives thing, and like you said, you could sit for 45 minutes trying to find the strategic objective, which you might still not get out of a call with a sales manager or something, because they might know the overall, right, we're looking to increase revenue. Right, it's not a strategic objective, is it? Increasing revenue. But if you speak to a CFO, then they're going to be able to give you OKRs, whatever you want to call them, each with a sub, initiative or a sub target that they've got to hit, and they'll be able to reel those off in 5 to 10 minutes, which is a big benefit. Okay, then let's jump into the how-to portion of it. So we've got the first one that we were going to talk through, or you're going to talk through, is how to build an exec level hypothesis. And what does your, I'm going to assume, I work in marketing, so I could get this wrong. ATL is above the line.
Yes, sorry, I should have.
Bingo. Yeah, no, it's all right. Hey, look, it's good learning for me. What does your, so how to build an exec level hypothesis, what does your above the line persona care about?
Yeah. So the first thing that I did when I joined Moss was I worked with my team. Obviously, they've already been selling for longer than I have with our product, to understand what the top 3 challenges were for every single persona that we sell to. So that might be, what does a CFO care about typically, and how does that relate to Moss? What does a finance controller care about, and how does that relate to Moss? And I kind of chewed over these for a while to think about how I could position that as a pain and how I could position Moss as the solution. So, for example, as I mentioned before, I'm not going to talk about receipt fetching to a CFO. I'm going to talk about reporting. So, first of all, you have to really understand your product and how you're going to pull different levers of talking about that product to link it to these initiatives. There's absolutely no way that you're going to be able to talk about hypothesis if then you say, oh, well, we can help you get 20% more receipts. Like you're going to lose that exec very quickly. So then I try and think, okay, when I'm looking at a specific business, then I'm thinking, right. I'm looking for these nuggets when I'm doing my research. Maybe I'm searching for certain things. I'm looking at fundraising reports. I'm looking at posts from the CFO, that kind of thing. And I'm trying to think about like which one of these pains is most relevant for that exec, and how can I build a hypothesis that leads to Moss being the solution for that challenge.
Yeah, I was speaking to by hypothesis, what we're saying is you're going to that CFO and saying, as I understand it, these are your 3 key objectives and pain points. This is how this is how I envisage Moss being able to tick all 3 of those off you. Is that what you mean by hypothesis?
Yeah, exactly. So I think that the focus for this CFO is going to be, well, let's say I'm looking at the CFO's profile. I'll say, okay, so they've just hired 2 new finance people in their team. They're growing 20% in the last 6 months. And I can see from this press release that they're just about to launch a new office in France. That gives me a really good idea of where they are. Like they're investing in their team. They're investing in new headcount, and there's a new office. Now I can work backwards and think like, what could we do with Moss in that specific scenario? How could Moss help? And then I'm going to work backwards from that. So when I go to that CFO, I can ask questions that will point them towards them saying, well, actually, yeah, I'm looking to get visibility over my new team. And then I can say, interesting. And then when I do my summarized bridge pull on the cold call, I can say, so you're launching a new team in France. You don't have the visibility that you need. You've got, initiatives at the moment around controlling costs as you scale. Would you be open to a 10-minute chat to see how Moss can help you do that? And bam, we have a meeting in that's at a high level initiative. I've not talked once about receipt fetching. I've not talked once about, invoice processing. And then we work backwards. I get an intro with the finance controller to make sure all the bells and whistles work.
Interesting. And then once you've built that hypothesis, and you've almost, got they've bit, let's say, how do you use that? How do you use that hypothesis to sort of position the product or service against the initiatives?
Yeah. Yeah, great question. So I think that like a lot of people I see do really well that like hypothesis building, but then knowing how to use that later on, I think SDRs get a little bit nervous about like going back to the CFO or to go back to their exec. So what I'll do is say I say to the CFO, you know what, I think I can solve this. Let me chat with your finance controller, whatever. I will then book in that meeting with whoever my person is, say financial controller. I will go back to my exec. I've already asked for their email because on the call I will get that from them to confirm. I will go back to them and say, hey, just booked in 15 minutes with Jamie today at 4 o'clock. Really looking forward to it. Thanks for the referral. After I've had that discovery call with Jamie, remember that we're trying to link all of these pains back to that high level initiative. So I'm going to have pointed questions about, time wasted or cost of inaction or whatever. Then I'm going to go straight back to that exec, either me or my AE, and give them an update from that discovery call. So we'll say something like, great chatting with Jamie today. Key takeaways from the call were that you're, missing 30% of your receipts at the moment. So reporting at month end is delayed and you're losing X amount in VAT. Him and his team are actually working 2 hours a day overtime and they're burning out, whatever. So I try and teach the exec something that they don't know about their team. And I use pain and emotional language in doing so, but only things that their team has told me. So if their team is really frustrated, I might use the word frustrated. Or if there's constantly being delays and it's causing a lot of headaches, I might try and slip some of that in so that I can then position Moss in the way that I want to through the lens of their employee. So I'm not saying that anything's bad. Their employee is saying that it's bad. But I'm just constantly highlighting this is what I'm going to solve. So I've put those key takeaways from the call, and then below it I'll say suggested next steps will be a demo of the platform, and then I might put like a one-line nugget of how we can address that problem. No call to action. Let me know if you'd like any more information, or let me know if you'd like to hop on the demo, or any additional context I can add here. And then I will often get the CFO saying, actually, we're going to be hiring a new whatever, but they don't know yet. Or maybe, actually, could you make sure that, you loop in this person? I want my FP&A team in, because if this is going to help with reporting, they should be involved. And suddenly I'm starting to multi-thread through the CFO within my deal. And then they know what's happening. When my champion then goes to them and says, hey, I just met with Ceri-anne over at Moss. This is the price. This is the proposal. What do you think? I've already planted the seed. They know the value that I sell. They can imagine the initiative that my tech stack, this will link to. And then I'm much more likely to get that buy-in and get it on that, in that quarter or within that budgeting cycle.
And in terms of, obviously, you've started with a top-down approach. How much involvement do you try to maintain from that C-suite or exec? As in, I'd imagine it like the training conductor, they've given you the green light and they've potentially passed you off to other people in the team. How much do you keep them fully involved in the thread, and you might loop them back in at certain points, or do you want them on basically heavily involved in every bit?
I think it really depends on the deal. If I'm selling to a B2B SaaS company that have got like a CFO, a finance manager, and there's 70 people, I can access the CFO all the way through the deal. I want them to lead the deal. I'd like to have, the finance controller or the finance manager have a look at the tool, be like, yeah, this works. Yes, the zero integration, it will work for me. And, just to kind of sign it off. So I know that we're going to have success. But ultimately, I'm going to keep that CFO all the way through. They are going to be the person that goes to the board with that deal, Whereas if I'm selling to a much bigger company and the whole problem, say, of expense management has been delegated under a VP or under a director, that's as high as I'll go. I don't want to burn my rapport with an exec by going back to them about something that they've delegated. So it's really like case by case. But I would just say, I feel like you can feel it, when an exec is giving you that little green light, when they're responsive and they're interested, absolutely keep them engaged. And I've actually, like in the last 2 weeks, I've had a deal that dropped out of pipeline. I went straight back to the COO. I sent them a voice note and just said, hey, what's going on with this deal? Like, I really believe that we can add value for you. And you've said that this is a really priority initiative. Why is this no longer, what's changed here? Is this no longer a priority for you? Or I'll use the Chris Voss line. Have you given up on this project? And then they'll come back and say, absolutely not. And I got that deal back in pipeline because they're like, no, I still care about the initiative. the champion has got lost in the weeds. This is a priority. Let me talk to them. And that deal's now back in pipeline and about to close. So I think you can leverage it in different ways depending on what that deal looks like. But you have to have that rapport up front. And you will only get that by linking your problem to that initiative and then seeing you as as a solution rather than a salesperson.
Yeah, I was actually. I'm glad you sort of mentioned the champion thing, because I was going to ask, like, essentially, you in an ideal world, that C-suite is going to be your champion, and if they're your champion, then like they're bought into it throughout, and you can leverage that as you as you need to throughout the process. You mentioned multi-threading as well. I know there's loads of stuff going around, probably in the last 6 to 12 months, about the benefits of multi-threading and things like that. Like, in terms of your experience, obviously your industry, your vertical or whatever, multi-threading for you, what does that look like? Is it is it as many people as it needs? Is it a minimum of 5? Are there red flags that you look out for from a multi-threading perspective?
Yeah, love that question. I mean, again, it's because of the size of companies that I sell to, going anything above 5 people would be excessive. Like, if a finance team's got 15 people in it, it's probably not an ICP for Moss. Like, we don't want to come in and replace some massive ERP for like a global team. That's not the fit. We want to find companies that are scaling rapidly and are trying to keep an eye on burn as they grow. Jamie, will you remind me the question? I've just gotten lost.
Yeah, it was just what your take is on multi-threading from there. Like, how do you approach it? Do you in your mind have an optimum number? Are there red flags you look out for? Like, oh, okay, I've only got 2 people. That's not enough. I need more people involved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it depends on the size of the business. If I've got, a CEO, a CFO, and a finance manager, and that's the entire finance team, I'm going to all 3 of them without question. I might even go to an SDR and ask them, hey, like, I might engage with some of their posts. I might build a rapport with the SDR. I might offer them some support. I might offer them my time, or, to share resources. And then I'll ask, like, hey, by the way, have you guys got cards yet? Are you using something like Clio? I might just ask the question on a really well-known name, so that they can, I can get that insight. And then when I go back to the finance manager, be like, hey, just spoke to your sales team. Great to hear that you're using X, whatever. And now I sound informed, and that personalized email is now personalized and relevant because it's about their existing tech stack rather than a hypothesis that I've built, right? So I will typically do between, I'd say, 3 and 5 people within an account. And it's, again, all about that hypothesis. If I think that focus is on growth at all costs, like they have just, raised 100 million and they're just growing and they're hiring and I can see that I've got advertisements everywhere, I might even go to the head of marketing and say, like, hey, would you love to earn uncapped cash back on all your ad spend? Because they're in that mindset. I could link to the marketing train. Amazing. You want to get, you want to improve margins. Here we go. Let's talk. And then suddenly I've got a CMO referral to a finance controller. So I think I always love to multi-thread. I like to get really creative with it. I try and think of like cracking an account open. Like, where are the weak spots in this account? Is it the SDR, who I think I can build rapport with and get loads of insights and pain? Is it the CEO, who's always on LinkedIn, I'm already connected with, and I just send him voice notes and I praise the amazing work that he's done, and I celebrate the business that he's built, and I ask if there's any way that I can help. Like, there's all these different approaches that you can do, and I feel like when you kind of get into the rhythm of things and you really understand your ICP, you start to see these little nuggets. And I think on this one, I'm going to do 1 person. This is a low value account. I think the spend's going to be really low, and I don't think it's going to be a big contract for Moss. I might just do 1 person. If I think this is an amazing account and I think all of these different people are involved in getting that train out of the station, I'm going to go for all of them. So I think it's kind of case by case, and it's about like what I think each business needs. But I think I'd go up to 5. That's my most. Anything more than that, and if I can't get it from 5 people, I don't think I can get it.
Yeah, too many cooks spoil the broth, whatever you want to call it. But any more than that, it's going to get messy, isn't it? So when you've obviously built the rapport, you've got the CFO or whatever as the champion. Once you've closed 1, do you then leverage them again for like referrals to other companies? Because CFOs know CFOs and CMOs know CMOs. Do you do that as well?
Definitely. I'm really lucky that we've got a referral scheme here at Moss. So existing customers are incentivized commercially to do referrals. But actually, like a top tip that I've never heard someone else do is I always equip my account executive with referrals ready from the disco. So for example, if I say I had booked a meeting with you, Jamie, I would go through your connections and I would choose 3 people that I would absolutely love a referral from, so that when we come out of the discovery call, if it's not a good fit and I've just put all this time into this meeting and I want to give, there's this feeling of like a give get almost, really sorry, it's not a good fit. Well, it's quite a natural thing to then say, oh, got it, Jamie, you know what? I noticed that you're connected with Ceri-anne over at Moss. I think that I might be able to help her. Would you mind giving me a referral? And now even it's not even a pipeline opportunity. It's not even one, but there's this feeling of, sure, I mean, you've been so great. It's been an upfront contract. This has been all about my top level initiatives. Then I've got exec level referrals, and then of course, once they're in the customer base, if they've been using the platform for 2 months and they're happy, our customer success team is fantastic at leveraging referrals. And that's when I would kind of hand off to them. But upfront, as you're prospecting, absolutely get cheeky with that.
Yeah, that's interesting that you're saying that you haven't heard the tip, and I think it's probably because most people are afraid to do it. Like it's one of those like semi-awkward things where you don't want to come across as like a cheeky chap. Like we've got a SDR that sits over there from up north, and he's probably one of the cheekiest guys I've ever met in my life. Asking for a pint when you go up to the bar. And it's in my head I'll be like, I don't want to sound like Aaron if I'm asking for a referral or whatever. But interesting. That's a great top tip, and that's going to be a nice little clip as well for LinkedIn.
Good.
Now, in terms of
be like Aaron.
Be like Aaron. God, if you knew Aaron, you wouldn't say that. He's not there. He's gone to get a coffee, which is good. But he has featured in a couple of episodes where he's come in the background and waved. He was in the one where we talked about the northern accent being the most trustworthy in the UK, apparently, which I disagree with completely. But there we go. Welsh is quite high up on the list.
I hear that all the time when I've had deals that I've won, and I know it's just because from the get-go they're like, oh, go on. Like I've had people say, I'll listen to you, say anything you want, Ceri-anne, and I'm suddenly like, oh, no, really, thank you so much, I really appreciate it, and I'm just like really putting it on so thick. But no, I mean, I think on that, Jamie, like if you can't ask for a referral, you don't have the rapport that you should have had by that stage, right? Like I love the Sandler methodology. I highly recommend that like people listen to him. It's kind of a bit more old school, but I love it. And the first section of the Sandler submarine that you've got to close off is rapport. If you don't have enough rapport to ask for a referral, something's gone really wrong. So I think
I love how blunt you are with that. As in, like it's almost that if you don't feel comfortable in asking that, it's probably something you haven't done during that rapport stage that is not giving you the confidence to ask that question.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. I just like the bluntness of that. It's honesty, which I like. Now, okay, so more of these like little nuggets of advice and top tips then. What's like the single best strategy for like top down sales? Maybe we could pick a particular part of the deal process. So like what's the single best line or tactic that you use in order to hook? I know you sort of said that, will you give me 1 to 2 minutes? Is that the one that works best for you?
Yeah, that's what I would say, honestly. Like the best question that you can ask, and I always get a laugh or like, oh, come on, when I do it, but then you get an answer. Like use open-ended questions with execs once you've got them in the right kind of topic, right? What are you focusing on at the moment? No. Most CFOs I talk to are trying to control costs, ensure ROI of their investments or drive efficiency, whatever. Okay, and why did you choose that one? And why is that important to the business? Okay, and what happens if you don't solve that? Right, and what have you done so far to try and solve that? Right, and so now I'm asking these open-ended questions, then when I can then summarize them back to them, and it's all relevant to that initiative. I really believe that is the first critical step of discovery with an exec. You get them to tell you what they care about, and then you can link the buying process to that. You go in and just say like, hey, how long is it taking for you to close out the month? And, why is that a bad thing? It becomes, you really narrow the scope of understanding. Whereas I've had, like you can hear it, the CFO like sit back in their chair and she's just like, yeah, oh, wow, geez. So Wow, this is why. So I had a board meeting 2 weeks ago, and they said whatever, and they're just telling you everything, and you just get like the oversight of what they're seeing in the business. And there's so many nuggets that you can pull from that for the rest of the buying cycle. You know, whereas if you try and go in and you pitch a CFO or a CEO, or you try and go through like a ladder of yeses or whatever, you know, these other approaches, you're just never going to get the actual insight that you need to get real buy-in. So I would say go in and ask, be really direct about why you're on the phone, have a reason to be calling them, you know, have that hypothesis of the initiative of, okay, like, I think I can help you solve this challenge. Do you mind me understanding, you know, what that looks like for you right now? And then I can give you really relevant, helpful advice. And then also on the other side of that, you have to tell them if it's not a good fit. I had a deal right at the end of Q2 where it came in through a CFO, 70-person SaaS company, really good account for the business. And I DQ'd it after this disco call. We, you know, myself and the account executive were like, I'm really sorry, but I think you're better served where you are. Like, I don't think that we can do anything better. I think that given what you need, when, you know, it's not us. And then 4 days later, what they needed changed. They cancelled one of their initiatives, and suddenly the focus for that initiative slightly changed. You know, one of the carriages on that train got replaced, and suddenly that CFO now trusts me and came straight back to me. They had a discovery call, a demo, and signed the proposal on the day, first day of the quarter. That would never have happened if they didn't trust me. They didn't feel like I understood their initiatives and their high level challenges that they wanted to solve. I had to be that voice to them, and because of that, then I got that really quick win that I wouldn't have got otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, it's always nice to start the quarter in that way, isn't it? Like we have these. There's a guy called Corporate Bro, I think, on LinkedIn that most sales reps will know because of the funny videos he does. But he talks about something called like a jalapeno popper, which is either a small deal that closes really quickly or just a deal that's like it just closes really quickly. And yeah, they're always good, aren't they? They're a nice start to the week or nice start to the quarter. In terms of like,
if only they were all like that.
Yeah, Christ, jobs would be a lot easier, wouldn't it? But in channel wise, is cold calling. You spoke a lot about cold calling. You've said the odd like thing about voice notes. What is the best channel from your point of view in terms of breaking into a target account?
I think it's all about understanding where your target persona is. If there is, you know, if your CEO is really loud on LinkedIn and they're constantly posting updates about the business and they're, you know, shouting out about job postings, and, you know, it's a really young, modern, fun company, absolutely send voice notes, like connect with them. What I love to do is like a top tip is I will just send whatever emails I'm sending somebody, I will just send it to them in Sales Navigator as an in message. So like I've already done the work, I've put the copy in, and then if they don't reply, I'm going to send it to them on LinkedIn. If they've never opened that email before, and obviously I've got, you know, like sales enablement tools that tell me that, I'm just going to start sending them the same copy in 2 places. And then once they accept me, I'm probably going to send them a voice note reading out the email. Hey, Jamie, saw that you're launching a team over in France. I'd imagine you're trying to keep visibility of spend as you grow. Should we chat? Bing, I'm in. Like it's so much easier. And I've now multi-threaded that. When I call, that's going to be the initiative that I've got. So the first like 5 minutes of research that I've done now mean that I've got 3 different channels, and I can choose which one based on the persona. You know, if I'm selling to a hotel chain, I'm going to have to go through the front desk if I want to access that FD. And I've got absolutely no chance of doing that. So now I've got to go through email. You know, so it's about knowing where your persona is and knowing when you need to pivot strategy. If it's not working, scrap it. Try something else. If you've never had an email opened, why are you investing time in those emails when instead you could be calling that?
But it's very much a case of a multi-channel approach and just using whatever channel you need. Yeah, whatever channel you need to in order to break in.
Yeah, I use typically like an Agoji sequence for my high priority accounts. And then what I'll do is I'll just skip all call steps. If I'm never getting anywhere on the phone, I'll just skip all those steps. If I'm never getting anywhere on LinkedIn, I'll just skip them. So I'm always relying on having a sequence or a flow that I can rely on. And I'm just like pulling different levers on that flow to change per account. I might even put a little note being like, don't call this account, it's not worth it, you know, so that I have that relevance or the next SDR that picks it up.
Interesting. So in terms of if there was a new SDR starting and or a current SDR that very much focuses on a bottom down approach, what would be some like top tips or some advice you would share for an SDR that wants to try moving into a top down approach to sort of mix things up?
Yeah, definitely. Great question. It's really scary. So anyone that's trying it, like, just know that it is scary. And I was scared too, but it will work. You'll get there. First of all, I'd say search the CEO's name. Just search it. search in the CEO's name in Google, pop it in, and then just read the articles. So often I will just type in, Ceri-anne Boucher CEO company name, and then just have a little read, and you'll find like the CEO is putting out this copy. There's often a press release, or I'll do the same thing and I'll type in the name of the fundraise. So like company name fundraise. And when you read those, there will be a press release that says like they've just raised 100 million with ambitions to, do X, Y, and Z. There you go. Like there are your initiatives. Just, that's it. It's done. It can be quite easy, So I'd say the absolute first thing that I do on an account, search the CEO and search about the fundraise, understand what was said at that time or most relevant to the CEO. And then you can start to, do your research and double check the hypothesis, so to speak. They said that they were scaling internationally. Look at the headcount. Have they added heads in France? No. Well, then something's changed. I wouldn't probably push on that point because it might be a bit sensitive, Or if you see in the news that, that there's been some kind of upheaval internally, I might not touch that. I don't want to make anyone feel like I'm being unfair, but it just, it will help me curate, how I'm going to approach each of those, that hypothesis that I've built based on my assumed initiatives for the business.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know there's tools out there that can help you keep an eye on things like funding rounds and whatnot. But are there any tools that are like integral to this whole like principle and strategy?
Yep, Sales Navigator. I love Sales Nav. I've got so many alerts set up for so many different things. I mean, you've got your classic like change job in 90 days or whatever for like your low hanging fruit. But then what I like to do is I'll segment my accounts that I'm targeting, my priority accounts. I'll have like 25 of those into the deal size. So based on annual recurring revenue. So I'll say, I call them my shrimps, my fish, and my whale accounts. So I'll have like 5 shrimps that I'm going after. If they come in, they'll be quick wins, I reckon, whatever, the lower side of ARR, my core ICP accounts, my fish, and then I've got my whales, which are my absolute dream accounts. And I'd love to book those. And so what I'll then do is I'll make sure I've got, say, 25 of those. I'll put them into Sales Navigator, create an account list, and set triggers. So when I see anything that gets posted on any of those accounts, I will then have a little search. So in the morning, I'll come in, I'll scroll through, and I'll be like, ooh, this CEO is out in Berlin at the moment. Oh, there's a new team in Berlin. I didn't even know that. Why didn't I see that? And then I'll go in, I can update my notes. When I'm on the call, then I have that relevant, timely, trigger-based information. It's great to write a personalized email that's got like a poem in it and like a nice picture, but it has to be super, super timely. So getting those triggers, having them, I usually do that between like 8:30 and 9 in the morning before I start my day, have a little scroll through, get some absolute gold nuggets, and then I can kind of elevate that approach, that hypothesis, which was just like expanding in France. And now I can say, well, I've got this, in your words, this post that you did this morning, that's got so much more weight.
It's interesting because we never talk about business. We never really talk about Selligence on these podcasts, but the way in which you've just described golden nuggets and triggers, and that you look at your target accounts for things that are going to help you build out that hypothesis or whatever, it's exactly what we do. And I think we are actually talking to Dan, who is coming on the podcast, Dan Moss. I think he's EU based, isn't he? Amsterdam, maybe. I want to say Amsterdam. But we're also talking to one of the guys in the UK as well about you guys testing out the triggers that we deliver. So that's slightly off topic, but
Amazing.
I think, just the way you've described it there, I'm like, for me, that's a trigger, like a nugget, which is really, really interesting, but slightly off topic.
Awesome.
So are there any resources, templates, audiences, communities that you think are really, really good in terms of that have helped you with this approach?
Yeah. The first thing that I would do is talk to your own executive team. They are a resource that nobody seems to use. The first thing that I did in my first week at Moss is I met with our managing director. I've met with our founding team on a one-on-one, like over lunch. I will meet with the sales enablement lead. I will meet with people, like Dan, or I will constantly be talking to the executive leadership team at my company, because that helps me position Moss through their eyes. And it helps me understand as well, like what they care about. Like when we had we've called it Mission to Moss recently, our kind of big, annual review and the plan for the next 12 months, we had big OKRs and then kind of little objectives within that. That literally helps me imagine every other team that I'm selling to is doing exactly the same. So when I'm imagining these trains, I'm thinking like, what are these 3 initiatives that were in their Mission to Moss, So I think go and talk to your exec team, understand the language that they use, look at when they're busy. If your head of sales is in meetings, their head of sales is in meetings. You know, if my head, I always think like when my sales leader is like just got downtime and is chatting with the team, that's when I start calling, because that's when I think, okay, there's a pattern here. I'm starting to notice that. So you leverage your own executive team. They're going to have, you know, incentives to help you. Your success is their success. Talk to them. The book that I mentioned before, Selling Above and Below the Line, is incredible. Just read it. It's just Skip Miller is fantastic. What else? I think it's like support other SDRs in your network. Like ask how you can help them and they will help you. Like I've had so much support from you know, from new SDRs or experienced SDRs. I think just like reach out to your network. Like reach out to me if you want to find out like the best emails that I've ever written. I'll send them over. Like I'm not shy about it. If you want my cold call scripts, like I'll happily send it. Like feel free to connect with me. I think, you know, I really think that it's all about sharing, and I'm no good at sales when I'm on my own. I'm only good when I've got like a community around me, right? So I think,
I was going to say we'll hold you to that, because we typically do the written piece to support each episode. So what we can do is put some of those scripts and some of those emails in that written piece, and then it'll make it a really nice art of selling to the C-suite piece, and it'll fluff it out. So we'll hold you to that. So for anyone looking for some resources, give it a couple of weeks, or actually it'll probably be on their website already, to be honest. But I think I was speaking to a guy called Jack Nico at Sales Loft, and he's one of the founding members of AEs of London and SDRs of London. So just on that topic of like asking other peers and finding a community, by all means go and check out those communities as well. But I think I love the one about use your own C-suite and execs. Like it's so right. Like you wouldn't even think to start right in your own like back garden. It's almost like keep your friends close but your enemies closer. It's like, why aren't you like using people who are right in front of you? It's mad, isn't it?
Yeah, like why don't you, if you sell to CROs, email your CRO. Hey, I'd love to get feedback on this email. Would this catch your attention? Email below. You know, if I have a CFO that I sell to CFOs and I have one, he is my best resource. So like use it.
Interesting. That is a great tip to finish. So we're coming up to our hard stop, and I'd imagine you've got more demos or deals to manage that are more important than a podcast. But the last question I've got for you is podcast and nominate. So it's who do we need to get on the podcast next and why?
Oh, I would love to see Mike Hansen on the podcast from Growth Genie. I worked with him. He was my a consultant when I first started off in sales. He taught me everything that I know and helped me, create a go-to-market strategy back in the day. He now has his own podcast. He's fantastic. I'd love to see him on here.
Great idea. We've already got him coming on though.
No.
I know. Bummer. You're going to have to pick
Amazing.
another one.
Oh, okay. I would love to see Christian over at Contract Book. He was really loud on LinkedIn, and he led the way for me in my social selling. I really think that he kind of inspired me to get started. So I think he'd be fantastic.
Cool. I've just checked. He's not in my pipeline. So what I'll do is when I send the follow-up email, I'll just put a note saying, "Are you happy to introduce me?" Look, I'm being that cheeky northerner asking for a referral. So there you go. It does work. But look, I appreciate you jumping on and taking the time. Fingers crossed it has uploaded after we had to refresh the browser. But if not, I will wait till next week to let you down with the bad news. But yeah, look, I appreciate you jumping on, and good luck for the rest of the quarter. And hopefully for those listening, it's been a useful episode. Please make sure you follow, I was going to say hit the like button, but that's YouTube. It is on YouTube actually. So hit the like button, subscribe, leave a review, and we will catch you in the next episode.